So let's look at Starfish. We'll do a quick demo here of how it works, and we'll actually migrate a little bit of data, and we'll give you a good sense of how simple the tool is and yet how powerful it is. So I'm going to come out of the meeting here, and on my screen we can see Starfish, and this is the tool. It's just a Windows application, and this is it. What we're going to do, and I'll just come to the window behind Starfish, what we're going to do is we're going to take these 10 records that are in Microsoft CRM, that's the system we're looking at here, and we're going to migrate these records and accompanying data to Salesforce. So we'll see those 10 records added into these 14 records that we already have in Salesforce, just to give you an idea of how quick and simple it is to use. So back to the product itself, here's Starfish. We're in the start screen, and we have a news feed here that just pumps any news articles from our website appear in here, and often there's tools and tips, like the example of this article about indexing. We can see on our start page those maps that exist, and the map is really the project or the document that contains all the information about what my source system is, what my destination system is, what tables I'm copying, all the fields in all of those tables, and we'll step kind of through one of those. So we're in the Dynamics to Salesforce map. It's this one, and we can see that we're in it because of the bar at the top of the screen. This little drop down here is the jobs, and we can see that we've got 7 jobs for this particular migration. Now, depending on what your data looks like and how much data you have, obviously there would potentially be many more jobs than this, but this is just a simple one, and really all I'm going to copy is accounts, contacts, and phone calls, and see how they get related back together on the destination side. So I'll go to the first job. We'll go to accounts. Now, when I went into accounts, we see that some more tabs appeared. Origin, destination, mapping, preview, run. So we'll go through all of those. So first into the general tab, we have the capacity here to see the jobs that we have and change the order of the jobs. We have information here about the licensing, so we can see that the license is valid until 2020. I can hit this one button when I make my connection to my origin, and this will suck all the data out of the origin database, or rather copy all the data out of the origin database into just a SQL database. So it's very simple, very quick. It doesn't map anything to some other system except a SQL database, but it's often useful. An example of where this is commonly used is if you're moving from Salesforce to some other system and you're about to have to renew your Salesforce license. Well, let's just grab the data, and then you can let those licenses expire, and we still have all the data, and then we can, on our own timeline, migrate that data into whatever our new CRM system is. We also see down here that we have connection information for our SMTP server. What this allows is for the emailing of alerts as and when we request them from the system, and we can tell who we're emailing these to. We put the addresses in here, and then we would have our the rules. What are we notifying on information or on errors, either or both of those. And we can see which job we're currently on. This is the accounts job. It has an ID, and I can choose my next job down here, and then what that allows me to do ultimately is chain the jobs up. So I start by clicking on the account and then run job, and it runs the accounts, and when that's completed, then it runs the next job, in this case maybe contacts, then any other jobs after that. So you could potentially chain all your jobs together and then have them all run from a single click of the button, or you can run them independently, and it's really up to you. So let's look at the Origin tab. So we're connected, as I said, to a Microsoft CRM instance, and we can see that the tab that's highlighted here is Dynamic CRM. There's my username and password. This is the instance of the Microsoft CRM instance that I'm pointing to. And then this is the data that I'm selecting. So I'm only selecting, well, I'm selecting everything, right? Because my select statement says select everything from account. And what I can do is I can just test my connection, and if I click up here, it'll quickly go out and it'll attempt to make a connection to my CRM instance, and it'll tell me how much data there is. So I tested my connection, it told me that there's 10 rows. Maybe I want to look at that data, and I can preview that data down here if I just hit my refresh button there. And here's the raw data that's in the table for the account entity in my Microsoft CRM instance. If I scroll across, we see a lot of IDs, a lot of fields, all the data that's in the table that we may or may not want to bring across. We may want to bring all of it, we may just want to bring some of it, we may need to do something to that data before we can bring it into our new system, and that's exactly what we'll do in these other steps. But as I said, this is Dynamic CRM, and here we have all sorts of different connectors to other standard CRMs, standard database formats. For example, we've got the HubSpot connector, IBM DB2, Lotus Notes. There's an old Microsoft CRM, MySQL database. If I move across here, we can see that we have other CRMs such as Sage CRM and Salesforce. So these are all my origin connectors, and we've selected our connector, and we need to now select our destination, which will be Salesforce, because that's the system that we're migrating to. So this is our destination connector now, and you can see that we're connecting to Salesforce, right, because we can tell what tab we're on. And here I'm adding credentials for my Salesforce entity. If it was a sandbox, I would check that, and then this is just the confirmation that I'm logging into the right machine. Salesforce itself happens to allow bulk data inserts, so we could, if we had a lot of rows of data, we could prefer that method, and those things, where they're available, are all built into the connector, so it's typically just a case of checking a box. So that's what we're looking at, and if I hit test the connection, yeah, it just says we're successfully connected. It took 0.7 seconds to get out to find that. Okay, so now we're looking at the data itself, and we have a mapping screen, and we can have various stages within a map. In this map, we happen to only have one stage. That's a stage just to insert accounts. So what we're seeing here on this column here, we see the destination fields. And by connecting to the table in Salesforce, it brings back all the fields that exist in that table, and then we can start mapping our source fields to those destination fields. And we have here a list of the fields that we're mapping. So we're directly mapping the name field in Microsoft to the name field in Salesforce. And then we have a lot of other mappings going on. If I want to add a field to my map, so I have account number, and I know I want to bring my account number from Microsoft, all I do is I click in the origin field, and I highlight my list of fields that are available to me. This is all the fields in Microsoft. The fields that are white are fields that are not being mapped, and those fields in this kind of golden brown color, those are fields that are being mapped and currently exist in this map. So what I want to do is I just want to map account number to account number. So I find my source field account number, and then we can see that it's added it to the map. I can see what my field types are in the destination system as well, and I have other functionality, like I may want to skip a row if some field that I encounter as I go through this process is blank, right? So I would just check that, and if it met that condition, that field was blank, it would then just skip the row. We have other functions. So if I double click here on the operation, what we'll see is a list of those functions that are available. So I could hard code a value in. So let's say I just wanted to make sure that these didn't go in as deleted, so I would just put a 0 as a hard-coded value. We have a SQL lookup, so we could look at the SQL in the origin or the destination system. Smart lookup is a very similar process. It looks at the destination database to see if there's something in there that we need for this process. Scripted values, so we can apply VB script or C# script here. So what that allows me to do is, if we need to do something with complex logic to the data before we transmit it to the destination, we would potentially need to do that with scripting. And we'll look at a field here that has some scripting just to give you a sense of that. We have this concept of a cross-reference read, and this is just a way of tying up our IDs. And as we go through this, I'll talk a little bit more about that and show you where those relationships exist. And this is a very powerful part of what an ETL tool that really can't be replicated by trying to import your data in any other way. This idea of preserving the IDs as you go, and by doing so is the only way that you can then tie up those related records. So I have to know what my new account ID is in the destination system, so that when I bring my contacts into that system, those contacts get tied up to the correct account number. And what a lot of CRM vendors will tell you is that they have data loaded tools and things that will help you do that. And it's probably fair to say that it'll help you a little bit, but it certainly won't enable you to cross-reference all your data back together again. Okay, so we'll look at that. I can do format conversion, so I can convert a rich text field to a plain text, and there's a few different conversion operations that I can do here. I could set the current time, and SalesLogix is a CRM that has a peculiarity in the way it issues IDs, so there's a function built in to grab the ID. So let's look at a scripted field value. So what we're saying in this one is just that we're going to take the address. If there's an address line 1 and it's not blank, then we'll add it to our scripted field. If there's an address line 2, we'll add that. If there's an address line 3, we'll add that. Because what Salesforce needs is those street address lines. It needs it all in one field. We're bringing it from 3 fields, and in this operation, we're putting it into 1 field. Okay, so that's the mapping. We're also in this process grabbing our IDs, and we have this built-in function called cross-reference write, and what that does is we're just telling the system that this is the file that we're going to collect our IDs in, and then after operation, after we push this one line, we have the operation to actually write the cross-reference IDs in. And all we're saying here is that we're going to take our old ID, which is the origin ID, and our new ID, which is our destination stage ID, and we're going to put those into a file. And in that way, when we go to do our next operation, we'll know how to tie up the data to the correct record on the destination side. So a little technical, but it's just a powerful capability of the tool that kind of needs to be touched on at this stage. So we have a way to preview our data, and we have a way to run our data. So what we want to do first of all, as we build our job, is we want to take a look, and we just want to see what's going to actually happen, what our results are expected to be when we run our data in. So we're going out quickly and we grab in the first row, and this column over here shows me all the fields on the origin side and all the values that it pulled in that row. So we can see that they have 9,500 employees, and what we're seeing on this side is what it's going to present to the destination system. So I don't know, there's 100 maybe a bit more in terms of the number of fields on this side, but we really only need these 20 or so fields. So we did that by mapping them, and now we're seeing what the results of this is going to look like. I have a log here as well, so if something didn't happen on that side, I can scroll through each operation within the map, and I can see what the results turned out to be. So just a little way to kind of troubleshoot as you go through the process of bringing data in or using the tool. So now we're happy that our preview was okay, then we would look to run the job. This is our run screen. I ran something a little earlier, so I'm already seeing some results. I haven't actually kicked this job off yet. But what we'll see when we run the job is that all I need to do at this point is hit the start button. What I could do is I could dial up the logging, so when the job finishes, it'll give me a result like we see down here. This is just really a count of successes and failures, and we can see that. But if I wanted a little bit more detail, maybe some of my rows were failing as I was bringing the data in my sort of 4 or 5 rows of my initial tests. Maybe I just want to see what actually happened. So I might dial up the logging to high just while I'm getting ready to run the main job. Thread count here, if the origin or the destination system allows it, I could run this and log into that system multiple times, so run it on multiple threads. So I could perhaps say have a thread count of 10. So what that really means is it's going to attempt to present 10 rows of data at a time to the destination system, and obviously that's an exponential increase in the speed of how quickly the data runs in. I can tell it which row I want to begin at and which row I want to end at. So if I just wanted to run in the first 100 rows, I would just say end after row 100. It would run in those 100 rows and then it would stop. So let's go ahead and run this data in. And again, we don't have any data in, we don't have this data in Salesforce yet, but hopefully after we've run this data in, we will. So let me show you Salesforce just to prove that out. So we've got, I'll just refresh the data, we've got 14 rows, that's all there is. I'll move that out of the way and I'll go ahead and start this job off. So now it's logging in sides, it's pulling in all the data that we want, and now it's attempting to insert the data. And it's done so. So it grabbed the 10 rows that we had and it inserted those 10 rows. Let's bring Salesforce back again and refresh. Sure enough, we had 14, now we've got 24, and we can see that all these ones with sample at the end, those are all my Microsoft rows. If I go to reported accounts view, I can see exactly those 10 rows of data that we saw on the origin side. But now what we want to do is we want to also get the contacts, because in Microsoft CRM I had contacts related to these accounts, and I also have some phone calls related to these accounts. So what I want to do is, and again, let's move this out of the way. Now I want to go to my next job, which is contacts. And just go back to the mapping just for 1 second. So now we're reading the cross-reference file that we previously created for accounts, which is the file that tells me what my source ID is and then what destination ID is related to. And then at the end of this job, as we're doing that, we want to write the contact IDs as well. So let me just show you what one of these files like, very basic thing. And I'm just going to open this cross-reference file and drag it across. And all it is the old ID. This is the Microsoft ID. That's this pipe symbol. Then here's the destination ID. So when I see a row on the origin side that has this in the account ID, I know that what I need to give it in Salesforce is this ID, which is the Salesforce ID. So let's get rid of that. So now let's run contacts in. again, we go to the Run tab, we're on the context and we hit the Start button. And it's just connecting. Okay, so what it did was it took the 13 contacts that we have and we brought them across to Salesforce. So again, let's look at our Salesforce data, and let's go into an account. So we have this account called AData, and this was in Microsoft, and we can see from here that we have, those are the contacts that we had in Microsoft. Let's just confirm that. Here's the record in Microsoft, and there's the contacts, Susan Burke and Rene Valdez. Yep, Susan Burke, Rene Valdez. So it tied those up together. Now let's run our final piece for this exercise, which is our phone calls. And what phone calls are actually related to is contacts. So I need those contact IDs, and I have those in my cross-reference files, and now when I run these phone calls, should tie up to the appropriate accounts and contacts in Salesforce. Okay, so our job finished, and again back to Salesforce, and if I just refresh this record, what we can see now is that we have an activity history with 3 records. So setting up my job and connecting it to the origin and the destination, I've brought over just about 30-40 rows of data, which without using this tool would be complex and difficult. Certainly you could just about figure out how to get your contact in, potentially using the data loader of Salesforce, but there's really no way of you bringing in that activity history. And typically, if you're going to do a migration job right, you want to bring in all the data that you want to bring. You don't want to be limited by whatever your CRM tools data loader allows. And again, that's really the power of Starfish. And the main thing to say really on this is that it's powerful, digs deep into the data, it gets everything that you want. It's also very simple to use. The mapping screen, very intuitive, very simple to use. How you select your connector, again, very intuitive and easy to do. So what we found then was that after we created this tool, we were then able to give this function, this data migration function, to our team of business analysts rather than requiring the typical technical resources that you would see with a data migration. And often somebody that is somewhat technical and somewhat IT savvy that doesn't do this type of function can typically be trained pretty quickly to do so as well.
For more information, please visit www.starfishetl.com or email us at info@starfishetl.com.